20 tips and hacks for what to do if your flight is delayed or canceled. I'm Chris. This is Yellow Productions. I do travel guides that are fun, informative, and entertaining. This video, it's a live stream. If you're on the live stream, I look forward to hanging out with y'all today. If you are watching the archive, well, make sure you subscribe, click the bell to turn on notifications so you never miss one of these videos. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, Chris, why are you doing this video right now? Who is traveling? Well, you know what? It's the holidays around the world, and so lots of people are starting to travel. There were 1 million people just this past holiday weekend per day screened in the U.S. alone. And with the winter season across the world brings flight delays and cancellations, and so I want to share with you what I've learned over the years about how to deal with flight delays. And so tip number 1 is first to anticipate and expect delays and to pay attention for them. That's right. So when you're flying, you shouldn't just end up at the airport and assume your flight's going to be late. Assume your flight's going to be on time. Plan for it to be delayed. Now, you want to check the status of your flight always before you leave for the airport. If I'm doing like a long international flight, I actually like to check the status the night before, because if it's a 14-hour flight, then you can tell, well, they might even know it's delayed before then. Now, it's also good with your airline's mobile app to sign up for notifications, because many airlines will actually push you notifications about delays, perhaps even before you see it made in the airport or on the screen. And knowing when your flight is delayed and being maybe one of the first to know it before everybody else does can be key to help you figure out what to do next. And so it's also good to look at the weather, because weather can delay things. And just the final thing about preparation and anticipating delays is never book crazy tight connections. Airlines will let you book tighter connections than you really ever should. In like international connections, I never like less than almost 2 hours. But United Airlines might actually let you book a 30-minute connection at LAX. Don't do it unless you really like to misconnect. Now, my hack for you is, in addition to checking the status of the flight that you're on, check the status of the incoming flight. So you can often figure out either various websites or even sometimes via the airline, like United on their mobile app will tell you, hey, this plane from San Diego to San Francisco, before that is actually coming from Washington, D.C. And so check the status of that leg too, because the airlines often don't delay flights until they really know how long the delay is going to be. But you can check and be like, well, my flight's supposed to leave at 2 o'clock, but the incoming plane that I'm supposed to be on coming from Washington, D.C. doesn't get here until 3. So I'm pretty certain that this flight is not going to leave at 2. So that's a great way to anticipate it and be like, something's going to happen. I will need to do something about it. All right. So when something does happen, tip number 2 is don't panic. That's the first one. Don't panic. Your flight's delayed. Your flight's canceled. People usually panic at that point. Don't panic. Don't join the herd, but do act quickly, because time is of the essence. But you should know that as you're planning your new flights, to be flexible and to be polite. And also just a note that this is all much easier if you're carrying luggage on, particularly if you're in the middle of a route. Say you're going San Diego to Washington, D.C., you're connecting in Chicago. If you have carry-on bags, it's much easier to be put on different airlines or last minute get a ticket on a different plane. If you have checked luggage, this becomes more difficult and will take longer, and you have to have a larger time threshold to make these changes. Now, my third tip before you act, and I go, Chris, you said what? Chris, don't panic, but do act. What am I supposed to do? Well, I'm going to tell you that in a second. But the first thing you should check is you should check to see if you've been rebooked automatically. Many airlines, if your flight's canceled, will rebook you to another flight that same day or rebook you tomorrow. So you can check within their app or with the airline agents to see if you've been rebooked. Usually the airline's app is the best way to see if you've been rebooked. Sometimes they send that via text message. Sometimes they send it via email too. Now, The fourth tip is to know your options. What are the options and what are the things you can do when your flight's delayed? You don't just have to wait for that flight to be delayed, but you can take other flights that are later time. You can go out of other airports. You can connect in other places. You can even fly on other airlines. And I'll say, note in number one, I said anticipate delays. I often, almost always when I fly, anticipating those delays, I research other routes to say, well, if I'm flying from Los Angeles to Taipei, and maybe it's a direct flight, but what are some other flights that are around the same time that if this one gets delayed or canceled, that I could instead go through Tokyo Narita and connect to Taipei? I could go through Seoul, Korea and connect to Taipei. So it's good to just have a few of those things in your head about other routes or options to get to your destination. Now, one of the things that I mentioned, people often don't think about other airports, but I do want you to think about, well, you don't just have to be in this airport, and maybe the flight that you were on was the only flight out of this airport today, but maybe there's another airport nearby within an hour, 2-3 hour drive that you could get to that'll get you to where you're going quicker. One time I was flying from Ontario Airport, which is in the greater Los Angeles area, and I was going to Paris, France, and connecting in San Francisco out of Ontario. Well, my flight in Ontario, it was delayed significantly out of Ontario. I was going to misconnect in San Francisco and not make my flight to Paris. So at Ontario Airport, I went to the ticket counters and I said, hey, the flight's been delayed. I'm going to misconnect. What can you do for me? And they're sort of basically like, book you on a flight tomorrow? And I'm like, hey, how about out of LAX? Maybe I can go from LAX to Chicago and maybe get to Paris that way. And they're like, well, can you make it to LAX for this flight that leaves in 2 hours? Now, if you don't know the LA metropolitan area, Ontario to LAX is about a 1 hour drive. So trying to get there and park and go through security is a challenge to do that in 2 hours. But I'm like, absolutely, let's go. And I was carried on, and I made it on that flight over to Paris. And actually, I ended up getting there earlier with better connections than I would have out of Ontario. But sometimes the agents won't suggest other airports. It helps if you can prompt them because they may just often default to the, well, you're leaving this airport, so go tomorrow. Now, some other good tools to look at to research alternative flights, alternative connections, alternative airports are Google Flights, Skyscanner, and I really like Kayak. It's a site that you book things on, but they have a really good matrix of a search engine to check that out. Now, let's go ahead and see what we have in the comments. Meritocratic Mafia says, if you never miss a plane, you're spending too much time in airports. Maybe that's a quote from someplace. I think if you never miss a plane, then maybe it means you haven't flown enough in airports. There's a lot of people that commented about this live stream earlier and said like, hey, I'm interested in this, but usually my flights are on time. My flights aren't delayed. If you fly enough, your plane will end up being delayed or canceled. But I will say I've never missed a flight where I've gotten to the airport and the plane's left before I've gotten there. As my originating thing. I've misconnected a whole bunch of times, but that's issues on the airline. Scottman895 Travel says, I'll have to remember that fourth tip for sure. Yeah, and thinking of other airports to book out of, New York City has Newark, JFK, and LaGuardia. Los Angeles has a whole bunch of these airports. Chicago has multiple airports. Washington, D.C. has Reagan National Airport, Washington Dulles Airport, Baltimore Airport. And even if you don't have a car, but you have to take a taxi or something like that, sometimes that $200 taxi ride might actually be worth it if it means you're going to get to your destination today, and otherwise you would have had to waste a day someplace. First in Line Travel gives a great tip about taking early flights. So I hate to wake up early. I'm not a morning person, but when I fly, I prefer the morning flights. And the reason why morning flights are better than later flights is if you take the morning flight and it gets delayed or canceled, you have more opportunities for more other flights later in the day. If you're the last flight out at night, you're pretty much out of luck. Your only other option is to go tomorrow. Let's see. Traveling the World says, I learned not to book tight connections because of my 55 minutes on Swiss. Hopefully you made that flight, Traveling the World, but that seems like a tight connection almost anywhere. B-Bear asks a slightly unrelated question, but I'll answer it because it's short. Would I recommend snow trampolining at Vail? I've never done snow trampolining at Vail, but Vail in Colorado is my favorite snow destination anywhere, and I really like the snow tubing. Snow trampolining sounds like it's pretty fun, too. All right, let's go on to tip number 5. Tip number 5 is to pay attention to the reason for the delay. Now, if your flight is delayed, figure out what the reason is, because what the reason is, depending upon the reason, the airline may offer you a lot more compensation or may go out of their way a lot more for you than other reasons. So what are those reasons? Well, if it's a weather delay, the airline's usually not going to do very much for you. That's when you'll get the least amount of help from the airline about crazy connections or upgrades or things like that. But if it's a mechanical issue on the airline, and then usually this is the term, if it's the airline's fault, it's the airline's fault because their plane broke, they should have fixed it, then the airlines will typically offer you much more in the way of compensation. And so the types of compensation you can get if your flight's delayed are things like meal vouchers, things like hotel stays, things like transportation to other airports, things like taxi rides. A frequent thing that airlines will do here in Southern California is, if a flight is canceled out of San Diego due to mechanical reasons, airlines will often put people in taxis up to Los Angeles Airport. It's 120 miles, but if it's the airline's fault, they're going to do that to get you on your way. And my it's a tip, but it's also it's a social hack. People often feel too nice to just go out of their way and ask. But if your flight's delayed and you're talking to an agent, just say the words, "Am I entitled to compensation? Am I entitled?" And you can say some of these things. Am I entitled to meal vouchers? Am I entitled to a hotel stay? I've had delays or misconnections where I've asked that question, and they're like, absolutely, you were entitled to a hotel stay tonight because it's misconnected. What hotel would you like us to book you in? And sometimes I decide, I'm going to just rent a car and drive 6 hours to where I'm going, so don't worry about it. But it's worthwhile to know that so that you know your options. So do not be afraid to ask, am I entitled to compensation? The other thing about weather, and this is one kind of like looking at it in advance, not like when the delay happens at the airport, but if you know you're going to be traveling into a large weather system someplace, take a look and see if your airline is offering flight change waivers or waivers proactively. One time I was flying into a snowstorm in New York City, and United ahead of time on their website said hey, your flight's going into weather. You can change your departure up to 2 days, your arrival by 2 days, into different airports in the region, and so that's pretty nice. I was also I delayed my trip 1 day, so I wasn't flying into the snowstorm, and then I got a direct flight instead of a connecting flight, and so it actually worked out a whole lot better. So think about those things. If you're delayed, if your flight is canceled, and the airline is offering to make changes for free, think about how you can get better changes and actually get on a better flight. What's Chris drinking today? Today, Chris is drinking Hokkaido roasted oolong milk tea. It's pretty good. It does have this kind of almost like roast smoky flavor to the milk tea. All right. The sixth thing, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but it's actually one of these numbers. It's don't be a sheep. So if you're at the airport, they announce the flight's canceled, and everybody gets in line for the single agent at that like at the check-in desk, not the check-in desk, but the gate, right? That's what happened. You've all been there. You've been at the airport. Somebody says, "Oh, the flight's delayed 4 hours. It's canceled." What's everybody do? Everybody stands in this herd. Everybody rushes to get in this herd to get to that one gate agent. It's going to take 3 or 4 hours if you're the last person in that line to get your options. There are much better things that you can do that we're going to get to starting with number 7. But let's go ahead and take a look at some of the comments before we do that. MT says, Chris, this is merely a rumor that I heard, but is it true that in Europe, if your flight is delayed, you get a refund? You don't really get a refund, but the regulations are different in Europe. Europe actually has regulations about delays that if a flight is delayed more than 2 hours in Europe, that you're entitled to cash compensation related to that delay, and the amount that you're entitled depends on how great the delay is. And so it's important to know your rights, which will be a tip coming up in one of these numbers. So yes, you can. The other one is, and this is anywhere, this isn't just in Europe, but that if the delay causes, if the delay is so long that you don't want to go anymore because like you were going for a wedding and now it's been like delayed a whole day and you're going to miss the wedding. In that case, you are entitled to a refund from the airline. And it's basically called my trip is now in vain. So you can say, you've delayed this so long, I have no reason to take this trip anymore. Please give me my money back. And if you're even like mid-trip, you can say like, and please send me back. Give me a refund and send me back. And they are obligated to do that. Ricky asked where I bought my drink. I bought my drink at this tea shop called Oro Bay. It's a pretty good tea shop that uses a espresso tea machine. Same tea shop that I was drinking tea from last week. I liked last week so much, I went there again for this live stream. Denny and Nikki agree and say definitely need to ask for compensations also for hotel problems. For sure, and we're certainly talking about delays for flights, but if you have problems at a hotel, issues with your room, things like that, absolutely ask and say, hey, is there anything you can do for me? Am I entitled to any compensation? You don't have to be a miserable person to ask this. You can absolutely ask that question with a smile on your face and be polite about it. Let's see. Kristen suggests also think about asking to be placed on another airline. I travel a lot and airlines partner with each other, so someone else may get you to your destination. That is a great tip as well. Meritocratic Mafia asks about if you're getting a hotel night as compensation, is there a limit to the type of hotel? Can you ask for the Four Seasons? You can ask for anything, but generally the airlines have partnered hotels. So when they say they'll offer you a hotel, they typically say like, oh, these are the 3 hotels we're offering. Or sometimes if an entire flight's canceled, they might take everybody from that flight, put them on one bus or 3 buses and take them all to the same hotel. You may want that hotel. You may actually find you don't want that hotel. And I've been in those cases where the airlines offered a hotel and I'm like, there's no way I'm staying that place. I'm booking this other hotel that's close to the airport because I also know that I'm going to try to get on a better flight than the one that they offered to everybody who was canceled. Okay. Eat Van City gives a tip and says, Flyer Talk is a great resource for last-minute cheap flights and deals. That and Chris Topher and Yellow Productions. Thank you, Eat Van City. I agree. Flyer Talk, if you've never been there, is an online message forum. I really enjoy Flyer Talk as a place to chat with frequent flyers about geeky travel stuff. Justin R316 asks, if the flight is overbooked and the airline offers you a later flight and a travel voucher, is it worth it? It's up to you. I have taken travel vouchers, though I don't take them all that often because generally I actually want to get where I'm going and I want to do things in that place that I'm going. But, if the airline's going to offer me $400 to get there 2 hours later, it might be worth it. Usually if it's go tomorrow, I've got better things to do than waste my time hanging out and not getting to where I want for another day. Okay. The tip number 7 for if your flight's delayed or canceled, and this is after don't be a sheep. So I said, don't be a sheep. Don't get in the same line with everybody else. So Chris, what should I do? I mean, that's what I do. I get in that line with everybody else, right? Well, no. The first thing you should do if you hear your flight is delayed or canceled is call the airline. Call the airline. Always have the airline's phone number handy and call them. You can actually do this if you're still on the plane. Has this ever happened to you? This has happened to me. You're on the plane, you taxi out to the runway, you're getting ready to take off, and the pilot goes, "Oh, there's a mechanical issue. We have to go back to the gate." And you're like, "There's no way I'm going to make my connection." You can be sitting on that plane on the runway. Well, when you're not like flying anymore, because the plane's not flying, you can use your cell phone at that point. You can, from your seat, call and say, "Hey, I'm on this flight. It's just delayed to mechanical issues. What can you do for me?" And the agents can actually get you new tickets and new flights right at that point. Now, if you do that from on the plane in the airport, at some point you're going to have to go collect boarding passes. The other option is if you're not on the plane but you're in the airport and you might say, "Okay, well, I'll be a sheep. I'll try my luck. I'll get in that line with the gate agent." While standing in that line, you can call the airline too. I've done that as well. You will find the frequent flyers are the ones that stand in that line and call on the phone at the same time, because sometimes phone agents can do different things than people in the airports. But whatever you do, whether you call them, whether you stand there, again, be polite, be nice. You get 100 times more things from airline agents with sugar than spice, because they've been dealing with nasty people all day. And so if you're the one nice person they deal with that day, they'll actually probably go out of their way to help you. Now, my hack for you in this area is if there's like a big weather issue in the country you're going through, and like say you're in the US, when you're calling the United customer service line, there might be really long hold times because everybody's calling them. Well, my hack is don't call the US line, call the international line. Call the United call center in Singapore, call the United call center in Japan. Call an international call center, because nobody's calling that one because there's no weather in that place. And you can often Google those numbers. You can like type in the airline and you can type in like international numbers or Asia number or Europe number for a different geographical destination than the weather issue that you have. Now, tip number 8, a better place to go than the gate agent, if you have access to the airline lounge because you have status or you pay for the lounge, is the airline's lounge. Nearly all of the big carriers that have their own lounges, American, Delta, ANA, Japan Airlines, any of these sorts of things, in their lounges, they will have ticket agents. Those ticket agents in the airline lounges are likely the best ticket agents in all of the airport and the ones that can do the most for you. So frequent flyers, that's really where they're going to go. They hear it's delayed. They're like, "I'm going to the lounge and I'm going to have that person help me out." And those are the people that often can be like, "Yeah, I know I can't get you any flights, but I see I know you booked economy, but I see some business class tickets. I can get you in one of those business class seats and get you on to where you're going." And when you're in the lounge, you might want to then, you're like, "Oh, well, now I got a flight. It's in 2 hours. I can get something to eat while I'm there." Eat Van City gives a tip about calling that international call center and says, "Well, but you don't want to spend the international money to call the international number. Just use Skype to call it for free." That's a great tip. I always have Skype loaded up on my cell phone for international calls when I'm other places. And Jeff asked that question, and I think that was just the answer for Jeff. Jeff says, "Would you need an international calling plan to call that number?" Ooh, that was interesting. Ju Wee says, "What should you look out for to know if your flight will go from delayed to canceled?" Oh, that's the most awful thing, isn't it? Right? Where your flight's delayed, canceled, right? And often that's weather. Like that, it's either it's weather or mechanical, right? And delayed, canceled. When they say things like, "Yeah, we've got a problem with the airplane. We're trying to figure out what it is." And then if they're like, "Yeah, it's the engine. We need to get a mechanic. We need to get a part from someplace." Those are always really bad times. If you're looking at the incoming flight and there's weather, and the incoming flight doesn't land at the airport that you're at, like it has to land at some other airport because there's issues, that's probably one that's going to be canceled too. Justin Thomas says Qantas are removing their agents from their lounges and airside service desks. They want everybody to use the call center. That is pretty lame of Qantas, I have to say, because it is nice to be able to go see some good agents in person. MT says that he's liking the LaMetric YouTube counter. Thanks, MT, and good eye that you know that that's also the LaMetric YouTube counter. Can't wait for the 500K. Honestly, Bridget wants to know where's the traveling princess. She is in the living room getting her dinner time feed on right now. Eat Van City gave a tip that I want to toss on the screen. Eat Van City's giving out lots of good tips today, which is don't forget to get your frequent flyer points and hotel points. If you stay in a hotel paid for by the airline, you can absolutely get hotel points for staying there. And if the airline books you on a different airline, say you're flying American Airlines and then they book you on JetBlue, you can get JetBlue miles for flying on that JetBlue flight. You can also request what they call original routing credit with the original airline, and so you can get the miles on American Airlines that you would have gotten flying the flights that you didn't because they were canceled or delayed and you were rebooked on that other airline. That's definitely one of those things that very few people know, but it's something to be like, why don't you get the free stuff that you are entitled to? Okay. So tip number 9, what to do if your flight is delayed, is also go to customer service. In a lot of big airports, airlines will have set up these like central areas for rebooking or for connections. Sometimes that's a pretty good place to go. You know, Chicago O'Hare will have a lot of them where you can go. There's the American Airlines Rebooking Center where there will be a bunch of agents, a bunch of machines that'll help you rebook your flights. You can go there and you might have a lot less of a wait, and also that's what those agents are waiting there to do. They're waiting to help you rebook, or the computers are specially designed to help you do that too. Now, tip number 10, and this is one I do a lot. A lot of people don't think about this because they don't think about the other side, outside security, but to go to the ticket counters Landside. What do I mean by Landside? Well, you know, in airports, there's airside, which is the going through security, the part that has the airplanes, and then Landside is the other part of security, like with the ticket counters where you checked in, that's the part where land is. So if there's long lines at the gate agent, there's long lines at the rebooking centers, just exit out security and go to the ticket counters. The agents at the ticket counters can help you just as much as the agents inside. And at a lot of airports, like if I find out a flight's canceled, that might actually be the first thing I do. I look, I see the flight's canceled. If I don't have access to the lounge, if I'm far away from the rebooking center, I just turn around and head outside to security and go out to the ticket counter. And I'm like the first person at the ticket counter to be like, hey, my flight was delayed. Can you get me on another one? And they're like, sure, there's one seat on this flight. I'm like, thank you very much. And so being that first person or one of the first few people to get other seats really helps you get where you're going, because you can imagine if your whole flight got super delayed or canceled, there's a lot of people that are trying to take up maybe those few available seats. Shay gives a tip and says, always make a reservation from a well-known site or agency just in case. I agree. It's not worth booking with Shady Steve's online booking authority or something. So 99% of the time, I book my flights directly with the airline. The reason why, if you book directly with the airline, it's a lot easier when there's issues to make changes. If you book through some weird part of your travel agent, then there's often a lot of restrictions about changes. They're like, nah, you got to call your travel agent, and then that's just hard. First in Line Travel says, you may even get better service at the ticket counter. Agree. Because at the ticket counter, they're often not dealing with a ton of miserable, awful people, right? They're like, the ticket counter is still just people that are checking in, and they're still friendly at that point and not grumpy. Brian suggests, I highly suggest getting travel insurance for international travel, especially with Europe. Get canceled, you get coverage through insurance for clothing, food, in combination with the generous comp from the airline. That's a great tip. And to go along with that, also a lot of premium credit cards have travel insurance, which is another number that we're going to be talking about too. And by the way, on the note of like heading out landside, I do this when I fly out of Orange County a lot, and the reason why is because my flight's delayed. I'm connecting through San Francisco. Maybe I'm going to Hawaii. And I know that one of my backup flights is out of Los Angeles. And so I just go out of security. I go to the ticket counter. I say like, hey, my flight was delayed. I'm going to misconnect from my flight connection in San Francisco. Can you help me get to where I'm going? And they'll be like, yeah, sure, I can help you. And then I'll prompt them and I'll say, hey, you know, I noticed, and I think there might be a flight out of LAX. Like, do you think maybe you could put me on that flight? And they go, yeah, there's a seat out of LAX. You know, here's your boarding pass, right? Here you go. It's very weird to get a boarding pass at one airport for a flight out of another airport, but they absolutely do that. They go, here's your boarding pass, here you go. In that case, I got to get myself to LAX airport, but I do because my car is right there, and I head that way. If you do get rebooked out of a different airport, you might want to make sure that you get your return flight changed as well. Some airlines are a little bit better about doing that than others are. Jordan Grant says Delta gave him $600 free credit for a canceled flight and a free rebooking so I can fly to New York for free. That is generous of Delta. New York said, I've never had luck with Shady Steve's travel company. I know. I don't even know why people book with Shady Steve. We gotta get the word out about Shady Steve. All right. Tip number 11. If your flight's delayed or canceled, is if no other options, the lines are long, you can't get a confirmed seat, is to go stand by at the gate of the flight that you think might get you towards the destination that you're going to. And in that case, if you want to fly standby on a flight, what does that mean? Well, that means that you're not confirmed to get a ticket change, but if there's extra seats on the flight, then they'll like put you in one after they've boarded the flight. In that case, you generally just walk over to the gate that the new flight's on and say, hey, I'm trying to go here. This other flight that I'm on is delayed or canceled. Can I stand by for this flight? And then they will say, yeah, well, we'll put you on the standby list, and then if there's seats, we'll get you on the flight. It's worthwhile asking at that point to be like, hey, what are my chances? What are my chances of standing by for this flight? And in some airports, they've got screens that will show you how many people are standing by for a flight. And if you get to a flight and you're like, there are 200 people standing by for this flight, then you're just like, okay, I have no hope. I won't even bother. But if they're like, yeah, there's 10 people on the standby list, but there's 40 seats open, then you've got a pretty good shot. Let's see. All right. Jordan Grant says, I got a 4S on the boarding pass. If you don't know what the 4S boarding pass is in the U.S., that's the, I used to remember what this acronym meant, but it's like special security screening. I don't remember what the first or last S is, but I call it super special security screening. There we go, 4 S's. Or it could be Shady Steve's security screening. That's the new one. But that's the one where when you go through TSA checkpoints, you've got 4 S's. They're going to give you the pat down and the cavity search and all that good stuff. So if you get that boarding pass, then you know to allocate a lot more time. By the way, if you get a 4S boarding pass, if you're trying to do online check-in, you will not be able to see or print your boarding pass with a 4S boarding pass for online check-in. So if you're flying domestically in the U.S. and for some reason your airline says unable to print your boarding pass, please check in at the airport, it is likely because you are getting a 4S flight. Okay, tip number 12. So in addition to flying standby, sometimes the gate agents at other gates can actually help you just like the ticket agents can. It depends on the airline. American Airlines are generally not very good with this, but like Lufthansa in Germany, you can walk around Frankfurt or Munich airport, and if there's a gate with a Lufthansa agent and they're standing there, they'll often just help you get rebooked as well. Now, getting rebooked or standing by and things like that, if you have elite status with the airline, it will help you a lot with this. When they generally process the standby lists or when they process, who's going to get those last remaining seats, they typically look at the elite status first. Some airlines instead go by how expensive your ticket was and then go by elite status. But then at least, if you've got similar price tickets as someone else, then you've got the tiebreaker of that elite status. Tip here is if you get the 4S boarding pass, make sure you're in a good mood. For sure. And I tell you what, when I get the 4S boarding pass and I'm getting the pat down, I know the TSA agents, they don't like giving people the pat downs, and I just say to them hey, thanks for keeping us all safe, and then then they're like, oh, this person's friendly. I'm gonna go easy on this person. I like them. All right. Tip number 13, if your flight is delayed or canceled, is what we talked about earlier, which is if your flight is delayed so great that you have no reason to go, then you can absolutely ask for a refund. And you can ask for a refund, and you can ask to be sent back if your flight was you got delayed at the connection point. Now, related to refunds versus credits, it also belongs in this tip, is don't accept a credit if what you want is a refund. Airlines will try to offer you credits at all costs because they don't want to give you your money back. But you know what? Credits expire. And if you're not going to travel in the next 12 months, don't accept the credit. If you know you're going to use the app, then take the credit. But if you are taking credit, the credit should be more than the money. I'd prefer the money because, getting $200 on United and $200 on Delta and $200 on Qantas, and you end up with all these little small pots that you're like, I can't use any of these things to do anything. Okay, tip number 13. We just did 13. Tip number 14. Is if there's nothing available on your original carrier, like you go to United, you go to the ticket counter, you go to these people, you call them, and they're like, nah, there's nothing. Then say, hey, can you put me on a different airline? Is there something available on a different airline? They often won't offer unless you ask. But then if you do ask, then it opens up. They're like, oh, well, hey, let me take a look at that. I've been flying to... See, where was I going? Singapore. I was flying to Singapore, and I was flying from San Diego to San Francisco to Singapore, and I misconnected in San Francisco. Flight was delayed, right? I landed after my flight to Singapore left. So then I'm like, hey, what can you do for me? Another one, next flights are tomorrow. I'm like, can you put me on another airline? I think it was about noon at that point. And they're like, well, we can put you on EVA Airlines, connect through Taipei, and then to Singapore and get you in, I don't know, about 6 hours or 8 hours, later than you were originally getting in there. I was like, well, it's better, it's better than the next day. So let's go ahead and do that. We talked about this before to say that it's better if you're carrying on, because if you have luggage, they have to return your luggage to you, and they absolutely can. They'll return the luggage. They'll say, okay, go downstairs. We're going to return it to carousel number 10. But it takes about 45 minutes or an hour often to have that one luggage spit out someplace. Sometimes they'll also ask you to go to the baggage service desk, which is often the lost and found area if you've lost luggage. So checking in that luggage or getting it back can just, again, make this process a whole lot longer. So if you're flying someplace and you expect delays, then definitely plan to carry on. Tip number 15 is if you can't get anything out of the airline, they won't book you on new flights, they really won't do anything, it's all tomorrow or whatever, take a look at at what new tickets cost. Take a look at what is available on other carriers. There might be a discount carrier. There might be something on Southwest, you might, or something on, who knows, Spirit, that you might leave in the next hour, and the tickets might be $100. And if that's the case, it might actually be worthwhile buying that ticket rather than waiting another day. So remember, an option is always to just buy a new ticket on another carrier. Now, if you do that, then you may very well be able to ask for credit or a refund from your original carrier for the portion of the ticket that you didn't use. Eat Van City says, I once had a flight cancel on United. There was a Delta flight within 3 hours. United wasn't willing to rebook. I had to cancel United and pay for Delta and make the credit card claim. That's it. And so if United or the original airline won't refund you, then you can also tell your credit card and say, hey, this they weren't willing to do anything, but I needed to get where I was going. And Traveling the World agrees about credits. They're a fraud. You may not fly with them again. This is essentially a scam. For sure, it has. Jordan Grant asks if my name has ever been called out at the boarding gate. For upgrades, for standbys, for a lot of reasons, my name gets called out at the boarding gate. Funny story about that. One time I was flying from Taipei, Taiwan, to, where was I going? Hong Kong. On Royal Thai Airlines, on Thai Airways, and I guess I got an upgrade, but they didn't call my name. They just looked at my name and saw a Western name, and they looked out clearly at the boarding area, and they're like, oh, there's one American guy in there. Let me just take him his new boarding pass. It was really kind of funny. Nightwolf asks if I think flying first is worth it. Yes. I mean, it depends how much it costs. We've booked a lot of award tickets for first class. Let me tell you, since we're talking about delayed and canceled flights, one time we were flying to Hong Kong. My mom and I were going on a trip to Hong Kong, flying San Diego to San Francisco to Hong Kong. Our flight is like an hour late into San Francisco because of fog. I'm like, we're going to misconnect. By the way, we had booked, with award points, we had booked international first class. And when we landed at San Francisco, because we were booked in first class to Hong Kong, there was a airport agent standing on the jet bridge with our names on a plaque to say, oh, Mr. Rainey, yes, we are holding the flight to Hong Kong for you. I will take you there to make sure that you get to there, and we're going to make sure that your luggage gets there as well. So there's a lot of, in addition to like the amenities and things like that on the plane, there's a lot of extra perks that come with when you have those sorts of tickets. Ethan City asks, what's my favorite airline in first class or business class, Chris? Easy answer for both those. It is Singapore Airlines. Singapore Airlines is absolutely amazing, and my favorite airline in any class, frankly. Okay. So another one, you can't get anything out of the airline at the airport. Well, another option, and this is like after the fact, is, email the airline's customer service and express your displeasure. Just say, I was really expecting this. The delay was really long. I didn't get any flight credits. I didn't get this. And oftentimes you may get something else via the customer service email later. I've gotten sometimes 10,000 award miles, $200. Don't make up stuff, but if you've got legitimate things, then send them in and let them know. Kel asks if you can get an upgrade to first class at no charge. I mean, generally not like out of the kindness of their heart, but if you've got miles or you've got status, like some airlines upgrade you to better classes based on your airline status, and you don't have to use any miles. But generally, you need to redeem, some what's the word I'm looking for? Some unit of currency, whether it's an upgrade certificate or things like that, to get into higher classes, particularly on international flights. Jeff says, I can't go economy for long trips anymore, first class all the way. I think the other thing that's a big difference, and really why I would want business or first class flying internationally, is for a lie flat seat. I mean, seats that go all the way flat and like turn into a bed, I can sleep on those. I can't I can't sleep in chairs for a long way. Um, Chris asks if I think that Delta will still keep the middle seat empty through the summer. Sure. Yes. I don't have the crystal ball for Delta, but since they're the one airline that's been keeping it free, maybe that differentiates them from everybody else. Jordan wants to know if I've ever been on Spirit Airlines or Frontier. Neither. I've heard way too many horror stories. And I don't like to save $50 on my ticket, to get a discount because, somebody's going to like kick me in the shin on my aircraft. I joke about the story to say that there's many people that it's like, okay, you can save $20 if we kick you in the shin when you get on the plane, or we can save $50 if we punch you in the mouth. I think there's a lot of people that would take those discounts because ultimately it's cheaper. I don't look at just the cheapest thing. I actually look at like the entire service experience. Okay, tip number 17 is to know the rules. Know the rules in the country that you're flying from. The rules about cancellations and compensation, like government-wise, are where the flight leaves from, not where your airline carrier is flagged, not the home country of the airline. So there was a question earlier about, Chris, is it true that in Europe you're entitled to cash compensation? It is. The other thing to know is also that you're entitled to compensation if you're involuntarily denied boarding. What the heck is involuntarily denied boarding? That was the thing like 2 years ago where the guy was drug off the United Airlines plane. He was involuntarily denied to fly on that flight. And so if you are denied, the flight's still going, but they're like, but you're not because the flight's weight limited or we oversold it, then you're absolutely entitled generally to pretty good compensation if you're involuntarily denied boarding, as opposed to like volunteering, right? Involuntarily volunteering. Now, the other thing to know about this, and it's something I didn't know until I was involuntarily denied boarding flying out of Key West, Florida, because my flight was weight restricted due to weather, was that they processed the people that they involuntarily denied boarding based on check-in time. And I didn't check in online. I waited to check in at the airport. It's a tiny airport, so I didn't get there real early. So always check in online. That will help you protect that seat. Okay. Tip number 18 is to use your credit card travel insurance, to use your credit card benefits or your travel insurance. Many people, if you have like a premium credit card, like an Amex Platinum or a Chase Sapphire Reserve, they often come with delay protection that you can file a claim later to get back expenses on, hotel nights, on transportation, on meals. So whatever happens if you're delayed and you're expending money, save your receipts because you're going to need those in any sort of claim that you file for this. Also the same thing for your travel insurance. Make sure you also keep copies of your old itinerary, your new itinerary, and boarding passes, because that's often stuff that they ask you for, which really helps if you have the printed boarding passes rather than the ones that are just on your phone. Jordan asked if I cried when I got denied boarding. I was denied boarding, but I was rebooked like on another flight, 3 hours later. So I'm like, I'm just going to kill some time and walk around the airport for 3 hours. I was walking around the airport with my suitcase and my backpack, which is kind of lame, but, make the best of it. So that's tip number 19 is, nothing works. You got a whole bunch of time to hang on the airport now because your flight's delayed or your new flight's 8 hours from now. Make the best of your time in the airport. Don't sit in the corner and cry. Don't sit in the airport and watch paint dry. But, find a good way to pass the time. It might even be go into the city. It might go get a rental car. When I had 8 hours in San Francisco airport, I rented a car and I went to see San Francisco for 5 hours instead of sitting in the airport for that long. 8 hours, you can absolutely get out and see the city. Shorter amount of time, go to the airline lounge. If you don't have access to the airline lounge, buy a day pass. Many airline lounges for $50 or something like that will let you get access to the lounge. If it's going to be a long time or overnight in the airport, look at a transit hotel. Many airports have hotels right in them that you can book for the night, or you can book hourly. Go for a long walk around the terminals. When I've got long delays in Chicago, I walk the whole airport. I'll go let me go through Terminal L and K and C and A and B and C and back here and figure out I'll get my exercise in while I'm waiting for my next flight. And if it looks like it's going to be all night, book a hotel early. If there's, a thunderstorm, tornado, all the flights are getting canceled, book your hotel before they all book out. Have Expedia or have your hotel's mobile app, and you just might want to go ahead and book one to hold one of those for you. I'm glad to see I'm not the only one that likes to do that. Nosferatu says, I love strolling around airports somehow. I am glad that you like strolling around airports as well, and I'm not the only crazy one. And my tip number 20 is, if you are stuck in the airport for a long time, watch some Yellow Productions videos, because there's lots of great travel guides that you can watch if you are stuck there.
Fellow explorers, it is now Q&A time. If you've got a question, I've got an answer.
It is Q&A time, but before I take questions, I need to plug in my camera before it runs out of batteries. And so for 30 seconds while I go find the power back here, why don't you listen to me doing some karaoke of Weird Al Yankovic's Amish Paradise.
Churn butter once or twice, living in and on once or twice. Take a look as I walk through the valley where I harvest my grain. I take a look at my wife and read lines, she's very plain. But that's just perfect for an Amish like me. I shun fancy things like electricity. At 4:30 in the morning, I'm milking cows. Jebediah feeds the chickens and Jacob plows. Fool, but you've been milking and plowing so long that even Ezekiel thinks that my mind is gone. I'm a man of the land, I'm into discipline. Got a Bible in my hand and a beard on my chin. But if I finish all of my chores and you finish thine, then tonight we're gonna party like it's 1699. We've been spending most our lives in Amish paradise. Churn butter once or twice.
Okay, hopefully that was not too painful, but I joke that when I do karaoke, I only like to karaoke to comedy songs or rap songs, because if you're laughing, maybe you're laughing actually, not how bad I'm singing, you're laughing at how good the song is. All right, Traveling the World asks, what's my least favorite major airline that you've been on? Least favorite major airline. My least favorite meals, I love Lufthansa as an airline, but I hate the food on Lufthansa. I don't know, the German food is just kind of meh. We should do a live karaoke sing-along. We could. Wu Tai says this is great footage. Mark wants to know if I am really Amish. I am not Amish, but that's a great question. And Jeff says only I would karaoke to Weird Al. Probably, but I love Weird Al Yankovic. Wu Tai says LAX is a snooze fest. LAX is a really boring airport to be stuck in, and as someone who walks around, I'll walk around LAX too, but it is really boring. Mike Fitz wants to know if that was in an airport lounge. It was in a Round 1 arcade in, where was it? Temecula, California. Question if I think Japan will actually open to U.S. tourists in April. I think Japan will reopen for the Olympics somehow, but it might just be for Olympians or athletes. I know I made the video that said that's when Japan's planning to reopen for tourists. Vaccines are starting to get distributed, so they might also open up based on people who have vaccines versus people who haven't. That's probably if I had to put on my crystal ball, that's what I'm going to see. I anticipate a lot more vaccine type visas to get into other countries. Eat Van City says Lufthansa food is weird and J or first. It's weird all around, frankly. The lounge food is weird. Lufthansa food is just all weird. Justin asks if I think Alaska and American will merge one day now that they are both one world. They might, but they're pretty different airlines, I feel like, as part of like things they value and how they run. So I'm not sure. I mean, we certainly see a lot of mergers, but that's to be seen. Sailing Avocet says that I see you were in Disneyland. Is it open? Yes, we were at Disney California Adventure today. It is not open for rides, but a small portion of Buena Vista Street, which is the main street in California Adventure, is open for some of the shops and some of the restaurants. I will have a full video this Friday about it, so you can stay tuned for that. But it's free to go in. It's just an extension of downtown Disney, essentially. And by the way, Chris and Marissa, great to see you today. New York says, favorite U.S. airport. They're all so bad. So I like Orange County Airport. That's known as John Wayne Airport. A lot of people don't like this airport, but I do, which is Washington Dulles Airport. Why do I like Washington Dulles Airport? Because it's... particularly if you're flying internationally, the international terminal for Washington Dulles is really quite nice, and there's a lot of lounges at Washington Dulles Airport. So I like the lounges there if I have to connect and spend a lot of time. Nosferatu says, I'm sorry you had food poisoning in Amsterdam. I hope you get to do it again someday. I hope I get to do it again someday, too. I have nothing against Amsterdam, and I liked when I was actually able to get out of my room. I am BB is funny because they use my picture as their thumbnail, which is hilarious. Question: if I've ever flown to a Canadian airport, if so, which is my favorite? I've only been to Canada once, and it was on the East Coast. I went to Halifax, so I guess Halifax was my favorite airport. Honestly, Bridget asks, what is your favorite spot in your house? Probably the shower. I like being clean, and so the shower is my favorite spot in our house. Kel wants to know, what airport lounge do I like best and why? I really like Singapore Airlines lounges. Is there a specific one that I can think of? The Singapore Airlines lounge in Singapore, absolutely. That's probably my favorite lounge. They've got like this huge buffet, amazing food. In general, I would say I like the lounges of the Asian carriers better than the U.S. carriers. I like the Turkish lounge at Washington Dulles Airport. I also really like the American Express lounges. I've got an American Express Platinum card just for the reason of being able to go in their lounges. Kevin says, I have heard the new Salt Lake City Airport is nice. I've not been in the new airport. I guess the last time we were there was 5 years ago or something. I don't think it was new there. And Justin says, if you go to Dulles, go to the Stephen F. Udvar-Hazy Center and see the space shuttle and aircraft. It is a really neat, it's an extension of the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum that's there at Dulles. I do highly recommend it. If you've got like a 5-hour layover, I think you've got time to head over that. And Wu Tai says, I've heard the Singapore Lounge and Changi in general are awesome. They are awesome. David wants to know, what's the weirdest place you've ever traveled to? I don't go to a lot of weird places. I think one of the I did a whole video about like weird attractions. The robot restaurant in Tokyo, Japan is pretty weird, but it's also pretty awesome.
Yes, it's the time you've been waiting for. It's time for the giveaway.
Okay, it is time for the giveaway. I'm giving away a Yellow Productions Crew shirt to someone who can answer this lucky question. And this question is, I was telling you about a story where I misconnected earlier and I got rebooked to go through LAX and I was flying to Paris. What airport was I originally booked to go through? I was going through this airport to San Francisco to Paris. Instead, I got rebooked through Ontario because of a delay or cancellation. Which one was it? Oh, I guess I might have just told you. I got rebooked through Los Angeles. But anyway, the first person who says the airport in here will win a Yellow Productions Crew shirt shipped to them anywhere in the world. While we are waiting for that, I will answer this last question. Mike Fitz says, who was the most influential travel show host for you before starting streaming and producing videos? I really like Rick Steves, I like Anthony Bourdain, and I like Andrew Zimmern from Bizarre Foods. All right, and I see a bunch of correct answers. Kevin Carpenter. And
now we have a winner chicken dinner.
is the first one with the correct answer. There were a lot of people who said Ontario, but Kevin's the first one on my screen. So Kevin, congratulations. You win a Yellow Precious Cruise shirt shipped to you anywhere in the world. Send me an email to chris@yellow.net with 2 W's or message me on Facebook. You'll find a link to my Facebook page in the description. Let me know your address and what size shirt you want, and I will get that right on to you. Well, this Friday, stay tuned for my update on the reopening of Disney's California Adventure. If you haven't seen it yet, on Thanksgiving, we were at Knott's Berry Farm. That video is pretty fun. Check that one out. And as usual, I won't say goodbye because I'll see you all in the next video.